Frank DiMora here with the End Times Research Ministry. Let me show you some of the developments that are leading to the fulfillment of the prophecy of the war found in Psalm 83. You're looking at a picture here of the nations that are in that Psalm 83 that we are told by the Lord that these nations that border Israel will be attacking the nation of Israel. This war has not taken place yet, but with all indications from the unrest going on with each one of these countries that border Israel, we can see that the handwriting is on the wall, and just as the rest of the prophecies are being fulfilled with those birth pains increasing, this one also is on the verge of being complete. So what we do know for sure from the word of the Lord is that there are a host of nations that you see. For example, number one, the Jordanians. You'll have the Palestinians. You're going to have the Egyptians, Lebanon, the Lebanese there. Bordering nations, okay? Syria, a major component in this war. The people, as you see in Philistia number 8, that would be the Palestinians, the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now, why will Israel have to go to war? Well, there's a lot of speculations about that. One of the speculations is that the problems on the Temple Mount area, for example, ownership and complete sovereignty on that Temple Mount may cause a war between the Arabs and Israel. That's a possibility because we've been seeing a lot of tensions on the Temple Mount, and I just made a video today about that. So you can go over to my website, BibleProphecyMan.com or EndTimesResearchMinistry.com. And today is the 14th. Just look at the video that I made on the 14th at my site, and you'll see what's been going on at the Temple Mount. And I did give a full documentary on March 7th, which is also at my site, about a complete look at the rebuilding of the Third Temple and how it relates to the tensions between Israel and the Arabs. So you really should watch that. But this is a different part of the prophecy that could bring about the next war, which I think is going to happen fairly soon, of the warning by God in that Psalm 83 to bring all these nations, confederate nations, coming together against the nation of Israel. Now, if you know all the prophecies, you'll be able to connect them together because they're going to flow together. For example, the one that you're looking at here that I'm underlining or highlighting there in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 3, that's a prophecy that tells us the following. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write to you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, peace and security, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. So, who is calling for peace and safety? We hear it all over the world. The UN constantly, we're hearing this peace and safety, where the UN is a lame organization when it comes to bringing about any kind of peace and safety. The main issue that the UN continually points to is the trouble going on because of Israel, and specifically Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. They focused in on that. 193 nations constantly coming against Israel. And of course, when you look at Zechariah tells us right here, take a look in case you don't know this prophecy. You can find it in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3. And in that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. That means everybody, and eventually even the United States. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces. Now get this. Though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Does that mean 194 nations excluding the United States? No. When the Lord said all the people, that's exactly what he meant. So right now we're living in a time where Donald Trump is a really good friend of Israel. But let me tell you, friends, that's going to change. If something happens to our beloved president, and God forbid that ever happens, and somebody else becomes president like the Democratic side, God help Israel, because it'll speed the process up where every nation, as alluded to by the prophet Zechariah in 12:3 will be coming against the nation of Israel. Now look at Joel chapter 3 verse 2 for a second. I will also gather what? All nations, and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. This is a warning about a major conflict in the Middle East that God brings all of the nations, and this is when God destroys anybody who's coming against Israel, anybody who turns to try to fight Jesus Christ. That would be called the Battle of Armageddon. And that's the appearing of the Lord Jesus Christ at the end of the tribulation period, where he fights against those that are unrighteous people. People who do not have their name written in Lamb's book of life. Isaiah, another prophet, gives us a warning about what to look for with Damascus. Where's Damascus? Syria. Look what he says. The burden of Damascus. Behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. Damascus is the oldest living city ever. It's never been destroyed like we're seeing here in this prophecy in the book of Isaiah. And then you can go to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 49, because he gives us more information about the destruction that we will be seeing coming from Syria. When is all of this going to happen? Well, the prophets told us, when you shall hear the call for peace and safety. Everybody knows, like I said, that's exactly what they've been calling for. So now we're in the time frame where all of these nations that you're looking at here on the screen are going to come against Israel. For whatever reason, they are definitely coming against the nation of Israel. When is all of this going to happen? Well, the prophets told us, when you shall hear the call for peace and safety. Everybody knows, like I said, that's exactly what they've been calling for. So now we're in the time frame where all of these nations that you're looking at here on the screen are going to come against Israel. For whatever reason, they are definitely coming against the nation of Israel. They're going to try to remove the Jews, not only off of the Temple Mount, not only out of Jerusalem, but they want to destroy Israel altogether. Because when you read the prophecy says, because of this Confederate army that's coming against Israel, they're going down to destroy Israel, that her name is not mentioned anymore. So take a look, because here's an article about this peace deal that President Trump is now putting together. And keep in mind, every president since Jimmy Carter, as I explained a couple days ago, has been in the process of trying to get Israel and the Arabs into peace, calling for peace ever since 1976. No peace. And the only thing that's happened since 1976 is the tensions between the Arabs and the Israelis have gotten much, much worse, to the point where we're going to see a major war, and that major war will be Psalm 83. Look at this article on the 14th, that would be today, of March. PA organizations in the U.S. reject deal of the century. The Palestinians don't want a peace deal. They don't want to divide the land of Israel. They would like to see it because it would give them one step closer to their major goal for the destruction of the nation Israel. But they don't want peace. They don't want Israel to be recognized as a nation or as a people. They want them destroyed. So it should come as no surprise when we hear about the Palestinian organization rejecting any kind of peace process with the nation of Israel. Organizations representing the Palestinian Arabs in the U.S. on Wednesday announced their absolute opposition to participating in any political framework that seeks to promote economic peace with Israel as an alternative to the establishment of a Palestinian state with Eastern Jerusalem as its capital. So here is another problem. Remember Zechariah chapter 12, Jerusalem had burned some stone? Well, this man that you're looking at, Abbas, he wants East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinians. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has said over and over again that he is never going to give up East Jerusalem for a capital of any other peoples, because the capital of Israel is found in Jerusalem, only to the Jews. Here is only one of many times where the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has shown us that he's not going to cave in on where the capital of Israel is. Watch this.
Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years. All Israeli governments have built in Jerusalem. We're not going to change that. That's a natural thing. I want you to ask any of you to imagine that you would limit construction in your own capital. It doesn't make sense. And I think that for us, the important thing is that we are committed to our capital, we're committed to peace, and we're going to build in Jerusalem for all its residents.
Six Palestinian Arab American organization issued a statement to support for the PLO and its opposition to a deal of the century as U.S. President Donald Trump's political initiative to resolve the conflict has come to be known. So like the other presidents from Jimmy Carter all the way through, he is seeing the opposition of the Palestinians who have in the past been given really good deals and they rejected it because they couldn't get everything they wanted. And keep in mind the sole purpose of the charter, which has not been changed by the PLO, to destroy the nation of Israel. So when they sit down and discuss some kind of peace process, it would be like the Americans sitting down with the Japanese before the war. And all the time, the Japanese were preparing to destroy America. And of course, they did try. It started at Pearl Harbor. The Palestinians in the background are doing the same thing. They're alluding to this calling for peace and safety, but in the back of their minds, they're planning the destruction of Israel. Now, the Trump administration is set to unveil its peace plan after the Israeli elections in April. So we're going to need to watch what's going on in April and see what kind of peace plan this time is presented to the Palestinians, to the Arabs. And of course, this is the bottom line right here. And it's not just this month dealing with the Palestinians, but it's been this way ever since Jimmy Carter tried to make the attempts of making peace between those nations. Palestinian Authority, PA, Chairman Mahmoud Abbas has rejected the U.S. peace plan before it has even been unveiled. Now remember I said you got to put these prophecies together? Zechariah, the burdensome stone, would be what? Jerusalem. The call for peace and safety. Take a look at this. The PA has been boycotting the U.S. ever since President Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital in December of 2017. Look, people, let's face it. What God has revealed to us, we're seeing it in the news right now. And anybody who can't see this, I would say it's because they never read the Bible and they don't know what's about to happen. They're blind to the words, the instructions, the foreknowledge of things to come because they haven't spent time with the Lord Jesus Christ and His Word. They don't know the prophecies. Very, very dangerous in the generation that Jesus said would be around to see His second coming. Now, in relation to these very nations who you see in this picture here from the Psalm 83, I'm going to bring you over to a news clip showing more evidence that the tensions from these countries are getting to the point where we're going to see a war break out. Watch this.
Now, this week marks 7 years of Syria's civil war. What began as an uprising against the regime of Bashar al-Assad has become a regional proxy war. And one of the main combatants supporting Assad is Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shiite militant group. Its operations...
Okay, now I'm going to stop you here. Lebanese Shiite group. They're mentioned in Psalm 83, the Hezbollah.
In Syria, its relationship...
And Syria is also mentioned in Psalm 83.
...with Iran and its power in Lebanon are a constant concern of Israel. And now there is talk of another Hezbollah-Israel war in the offing. With me now for more on this tinderbox is special correspondent Jane Ferguson, who we have the pleasure of hosting here in studio. She's on a visit from her home base in Beirut. Jane, it's so good to have you with us. And there has been more talk recently of a possible war between Israel and Hezbollah. What does it look like?
We've been hearing this talk for several years now, and it now appears both sides seem to acknowledge that a war could be coming, may even be an inevitability. And this is because, of course, Hezbollah have been growing in strength with the war in Syria. They've been gaining a huge amount of military expertise there and experience. And from the Israeli perspective, that strength that is unacceptable to them is very much so focused on the missiles that Hezbollah have. Israel sees these as an existential threat. Also, with the war in Syria, we see Iran's influence reaching right across to the Mediterranean. That's what they really want to secure, but it also means that Israel feels increasingly encircled.
So if there were a war...
Did you get that? Israel feels increasingly circled, and that's what we see from the Psalm 83 prophecy. Those nations that border Israel.
Or what would it look like? How would this be different from what we saw in 2006?
The reason that it would be different is also it's tied in with why the war hasn't started yet. Both sides know this war would be much more dangerous and much more destructive than in 2006. The Israelis have already said that because of Hezbollah's growing influence and power in with the Lebanese government, that what they perceive to be Hezbollah targets could be more open than what we saw in 2006 when we saw Hezbollah neighborhoods in Beirut being attacked. There's the potential for greater civilian casualties this time around, as well as infrastructural damage. And for the Israelis, the risk is the missiles that could be launched inside Israel. So we could see both sides risk hurting a lot more in this war. And the other danger, of course, is that this war could become much more widespread,
pulling in other countries in the region, potentially.
There you go. Psalm 83. When a war breaks out and they see their brothers, the Arab brothers, fighting against Israel, what do you think they're going to do? Well, I rely, again, on Psalm 83 because it says the confederacy coming against Israel.
It's very difficult to imagine that this war wouldn't, simply because we see so many multi-layered proxy wars going on already next door in Syria. As you have said, Hezbollah are inside Syria right now, fighting alongside Iranian troops, their backers, their financial backers, and it's very difficult to imagine that you could see a war with Israel and Hezbollah that wouldn't draw in those other elements.
Well, it's just when we think, as we look and wait to see whether something develops between Hezbollah and Israel, we see what's going on in Syria. We keep thinking it's winding down. It's clearly not. We've been watching this terrible humanitarian situation in the Damascus suburb of eastern Ghouta. It just keeps going on.
The violence is continuing. As you say, people keep talking about this war, trying to end it, coming down, winding down, but it doesn't really appear to wish to wind down. And what's happening in Ghouta is a huge humanitarian crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen maybe since the siege of Aleppo, where civilians, even today, we're seeing thousands of civilians fleeing that area or trying to flee that area as the aerial bombardment becomes completely relentless and has been for weeks now.
Are people surprised that President Assad is going after this area in such a vicious manner?
I think not. After the last 7 years and what people have seen, the use of chemical weapons, bombardment of civilian areas, the targeting of hospitals, this isn't out of character. And now that the Assad regime has these opposition fighters surrounded, it's not unsurprising that they're hammering them in this way.
Everyone.
Now I'm going to bring you to March 13th of 2019 because Hezbollah is moving into position because, like the Palestinians who are mentioned in that Psalm 83 who want to destroy Israel, Hezbollah has the same idea that they too want to destroy the nation of Israel, and they're joining together. And here's the news showing you about the Hezbollah, the cells that are on the Golan Heights, which again border the nation of Israel. You can't get away from the fact day by day that we're moving closer and closer to the fulfillment of this Psalm 83 war.
According to the Israeli Defense Forces on Wednesday, a new Hezbollah cell in the Syrian Golan Heights has recently been exposed. But reports go on to indicate that the new group along the northern Israel border is just the initial phase of a long-term Hezbollah operation called the Golan Project. In a statement, the IDF explained that the Hezbollah terrorist organization has begun an attempt to establish and entrench a covert force in the Syrian Golan Heights, which is designed to act against Israel when given the order. And the network is, quote, new and currently focused on becoming familiarized with the Golan Heights area, intending to eventually control teams of Syrian operatives who will launch attacks, end quote.
Okay, so when they launch attacks, they're waiting for the order. Syria, we know from the Bible prophecy in Isaiah chapter 17, verse 1, tells us that Syria is going to be a ruinous heap. Now, when they give that order, when Israel flies in with their air force, one of the most mighty air forces in the entire world, they're going to level Damascus to fulfill that prophecy. And it will be, just as that prophecy says, a ruinous heap. We've already seen the destruction from 7 years of civil war. And it almost looks like we could say right now that Damascus is a ruinous heap, but it's going to get to a point where nobody's going to live there because it's going to be destroyed. Let's go on.
So far, this reportedly includes Hezbollah military operatives in Irne, Hader, and Quneitra, which is inside the DMZ. So far, this reportedly includes Hezbollah military operatives in Irne, Hader, and Quneitra, which is inside the demilitarized zone, as well as a military headquarters allegedly established on the front lines of the DMZ, just outside of Bet Jin. And all this reportedly without Syrian President Assad's knowing about it. That being said, other high-ranking IDF analysts say that they don't see how Assad wouldn't be aware, if not complicit, in the cell's activities. And anyway, IDF Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan stated in a message to Twitter that Israel will hold Syria responsible for anything that happens inside Syria aimed at Israel. Perhaps most alarming about this story, however, is the fact that senior Hezbollah terror commander Ali Musa Dakdouk has been identified as the leader behind this cell of the so-called Golan Project. In 2006, Dakdouk was sent to Iraq to command Hezbollah's military operations, and while there he was sentenced to 5 years in Iraqi prison for the abduction and murder of 5 American soldiers, among other attacks. And he's still wanted by American authorities. Then, in the summer of 2018, 6 years after being released back to Lebanon in a prisoner swap, Dakdouk was allegedly sent to Syria to take up this latest terrorist mission against Israel. Finally, in addition to Dakdouk, the Israeli army reportedly identified multiple other top-ranking Hezbollah militants in the Golan operation.
I've been in this ministry since 1976, and over these many, many years, I've seen political leaders come and political leaders go. And the ones that go are replaced with leaders much worse than the former leaders of those countries. Assad is one of those leaders. And I've watched him over the course of these many years continuously threaten Israel, saying that we're going to attack Israel. And I can assure you that's what he's going to do. And he may be the one that gives the order to begin the war, to begin the attack, and that all of these other components will follow in with them as that confederacy to try to take the nation of Israel out. Take a look at this article that came out March 7th of 2019. The headline, Syria. We will attack Israel unless it withdraws from the Golan. Israel is not going to withdraw from the Golan Heights. They cannot do that because it is a buffer zone between Israel and their enemies. There's no way they can give that up. And so we know that this is a mute conversation when it comes to Israel and Syria. Now, I gave you the information that Benjamin Netanyahu would never give up Jerusalem as the capital. And now let me give you the evidence right from the horse's mouth. Benjamin Netanyahu on the Golan Heights.
The Golan Heights is tremendously important for our security, and I think that when you're there, you'll be able to understand perfectly why we'll never leave the Golan Heights and why it's important for that all countries recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights.
A sovereign nation's ability to defend itself is the ultimate mark of sovereignty. President Trump has said repeatedly that he backs Israel's right to self-defense.
So here's the deal. The Prime Minister has fought in previous wars. And he knows that they need that buffer area because Israel's so small and these nations around them are so large, and they need a territory wide enough to be able to react quick enough for when the attack happens. This is why the Golan Heights is never going to go away from the hands of the Israelis. And since the Syrians and their proxies are now on the Golan Heights, on that border, getting ready for the order, you can conclude, hey, Psalm 83 is on its way. So as Syria is up in arms because they lost the Golan Heights in a previous war and they want this territory back, the Palestinians who lost East Jerusalem and Jerusalem in the 1967 war, and they've been calling for new borders, for the 1967 borders to be revived back to the Palestinian organization. These things are not going to happen, and because of East Jerusalem, because of the Temple Mount, because of this holy site, we can expect a holy war to take place. The Arabs are going to move. Listen to me. No, I take that back. Listen to God. The Arabs are going to move against Israel, thinking they're going to eradicate this tiny nation so that their name isn't mentioned anymore. But let me tell every news reporter out there right now who may be watching this video, if you think Israel is going to lose this next war, you're about the same as the reporters who thought Israel would lose the 1948 war, the 1967 war, the 1973 war. They will not be defeated. They may take a hit, but they are not going to be destroyed like this Confederate group of nations around the Israeli border think that they're going to be doing when they go in after Israel. Now, how do I know that Israel's not going to be defeated? How do I know that this little tiny nation, the size of New Jersey, is going to overwhelm the massive amounts of people around Israel's border who come after them? How are they going to survive? Well, when you read the Bible from Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, you'll see that Israel is involved again of another war. This time, it's not involved around the bordering nations around Israel, but it's the nations outside of that border from Israel, like Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Armenia, Russia, coming from the northern parts. The book of Ezekiel 38 and 39 gives a specific description about this war. And more than likely, what's going to happen when the Psalm 83 war is over and these Arab nations, the Islamic nations, see how Israel wiped out their brothers, they're going to get so agitated, they're going to try to pick up where the Arab brothers failed and try to come in and wipe out Israel. And another way we can determine that the Psalm 83 war isn't the only war is because there's a prophecy in Ezekiel. When you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, you'll discover that the attack will come when there are no walls, bars, or gates. When I took a trip to Israel in December of 2010, I took pictures of the massive wall that spans almost 320 miles through Israel, protecting the Israelis from the Palestinians. They have walls, and you'll see the bars, the gates, and the walls. Look, here's the gate, here's the bars, and here's the wall. And so the prophecy is very specific when it says when Israel feels safe, and they don't have the bars, the gates, and the walls, that would be the time that they're attacked. Well, knowing that Israel today has the walls, they have the bars, and they have the gates upstanding now, shows us Israel will not be defeated in that Psalm 83 war. More than likely, what will happen is Israel will get more land because they're victorious in that war, in the Psalm 83 war I'm talking about. And they'll spread out, and they'll get to the point where they'll feel safe enough where they can drop the walls, the gates, and the bars, because they're further out now. They spread their wings, starting to get the land that was prophesied to them in the Old Testament. Now also in the news today, March 14th of 2019, keep in mind the Zechariah chapter 12 verse 4 prophecy. about Jerusalem being a burdensome stone. Keep in mind about the Psalm 83 war and the prophecy that tells us all the nations will come against Israel. Look at this. Israel issues complaint to UN over the terrorists on Golan border. It's well known that the Hezbollah have been murdering as many Jews as they can in their attacks. And so for Israel to go to the UN, which sanctions them more than any nation in the world, is really a waste of time. Israel issued a formal complaint to the United Nations Security Council over Hezbollah's recently revealed Golan project, which has positioned operatives along Israel's northern border. They're getting ready for the attack, okay? Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, on Wednesday wrote to council members stating that Israel will not ignore the conversation of Syria and Lebanon, both nations mentioned in that Psalm war, to a military front against us, and will act with force against the aggression from Tehran, which obviously is Iran, referring to Hezbollah's Iranian backers. Hezbollah is not yet recognized as a terrorist organization by the Security Council, Danon noted, despite the plethora of evidence of cross-border terrorist activities. So going to the UN is like trying to present your case to Satan, because this organization doesn't want anything to do with Israel except for the destruction of that nation. And if you don't believe me, do your own Google search. How many sanctions have been placed on Israel in the last 5 years? When nations like China, like Venezuela, like North Korea, nations that are destroying people's lives, none of those nations have been sanctioned like this tiny nation of Israel. But you want to know something? It's all a reflection of what the Lord has revealed to us in His prophecies. The nations of the world coming against Israel. We're on the road to that fulfillment. We're on the road to not only that, but we're on the road to the prophecy about the war, the peace and safety and the destruction that will follow, and of course, the beginning of the 7-year tribulation, along with the Ezekiel war. Now, you came to this YouTube channel today, maybe as a Christian, maybe as a non-Christian. If you're a Christian, do you know about these events? And if you don't know about these events, ask yourself, geez, why don't I know about these events? Well, maybe it's because you haven't read the Bible and you don't know the prophecies in the Bible because you don't pick the Bible up, you don't read it. That could be one great possibility. Or maybe you have a label as a Christian, but you really aren't a Christian because you spend no time with the Lord, you don't read His Word, you don't have fellowship, but you are a Christian only as a label. And this is not the kind of Christian that the Lord wants by His side. He wants those that are on fire for Him. And I can say this knowing what the Word of the Lord tells us about what He feels about lukewarm Christians. He tells us He's going to spit them out of their mouth. You cannot be lukewarm for Jesus and really call yourself a Christian. They don't go together. And if you're a non-Christian and you see this evidence that you didn't know about it, and now you do know about it, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to just put it aside and reject? Or maybe think about, well, I better check this stuff out further. This guy might be right. But when you're talking about this guy might be right, you're talking about God. He's the one who gave us all of these prophecies. I'm just pointing out what God said. And God is always right. And that's why we're seeing the events being unfolded in front of us on the news. Connect the dots between the word of the Lord in His prophecies and what you see on television. You can do that if you know the word of the Lord. And it's my job to help you see those connections and hope that you won't need Frank DiMora. You won't need Pastor Frank DiMora anymore because you're reading the Bible and the Lord is teaching you as you read the Bible. The only way that you're going to get there, John 14:6, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Today is a good day to ask Jesus Christ, please, Lord, I'd like to go to the Father. I know that the only way that I can get there is by you. And so, Father, I present myself to you. I'd ask you to forgive me. I was blinded by Satan all these years, but you've opened my eyes today. You've given me the light. And I do request that your Holy Spirit forgive me for everything that I've done, void of the knowledge of your goodness and compassion demonstrated on the cross by your Son, Jesus Christ. And I know now that you are the Lord. And I know that when you told your disciples that destroy this temple and in 3 days I will raise it up, I know now you're the only one who could ever have done this. And you did raise yourself from the dead. And because of that event, you've given me life in my acceptance of the blood on the cross that you shed for me and everyone else. And Lord, now I understand and I ask for you, Lord, to keep my name in the book of life today as I wait for you to come back for me and the righteous who've already asked you to be their Savior. God help anyone who rejects Jesus Christ and his free gift. Please don't do that. This is Pastor Frank DiMora with the End Times Research Ministry. God bless.